Yeah.
Good morning. Welcome to Diane's Kitchen. No, it's not a cooking show. It is a time where we sit down and talk to interesting people. Today we've got somebody that I think is very interesting and really has things to say about the world today, about people today. Because 100 years ago, she might not have been in the business that she's in today. But Sam Sikorski, which name do you like best?
Samantha.
Samantha.
Yeah.
Samantha Sikorski is
I am a hearing instrument specialist as well as an audio prestologist.
an audio prestologist.
Oh gosh, how wonderful that title. Yes, hearing instrument specialist is the way the state of Wisconsin licenses us.
I'm going to have to start bringing a tiara. You could easily wear one.
Right.
Samantha Sikorski has her office in Spooner, Wisconsin. Where did you start? Spooner, Wisconsin? Where did this all begin? Where in second grade when teachers said, "And what do you want to be?" Did you say, "I want to be an audiologist"?
Not even close.
Okay.
Not even close.
What happened? What started this whole huge ball rolling? Because you are getting beyond popular. I mean, speakers everywhere. You're a speaker. You're amazing. So where did it start?
Well, I wanted to answer your first question, I wanted to be a lawyer.
You'd have made a good lawyer.
My dad said, well, honey, you're just not smart enough for that.
Oh, thanks, Dad.
And, not knowing it at the time, it was quite an encouraging thing to say. I needed that. What he meant by that is I didn't apply myself. I struggled early on trying to figure out what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to school for administrative assistant, figured I could work in an office.
Sure.
Back in 2000, I lived in Minneapolis, the Minneapolis area. 2001 came.
How old were you?
In my 20s.
Okay. All right. Okay, fine.
I'm older than I look.
Okay.
In 2001, obviously, one of the most tragic years in my lifetime, 9/11 happened. My husband and I decided we wanted to move closer to home. We were both born and raised in Minong.
Oh, sure. The next town north.
Yes. Yep. In fact, I was born here at the hospital in Spooner.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you definitely have connections.
Yes.
All right.
Yep. And so when we moved back, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a job. We just wanted to be closer to home. And I decided to take a position and go back to schooling for occupational hearing conservation.
Why?
Well, I was on my high horse at that time and wanted to prevent hearing loss.
Why?
My grandfather was a logger. And I can vividly remember being 8 years old and maybe my first hearing aid sale. I told my grandfather to call Beltone. There was this commercial on with a little kid saying, "Grandpa, call 800 Beltone." And my grandfather was asking us to repeat all of the time. And so the commercial sold me, and I had told him he needed hearing aids. He got hearing aids. They were expensive. This was in the 80s, and they were a couple $1,000s. The family pooled in money to help him get his hearing aids, and
Nice.
he hated them. He hated them.
Why do people hate them
Well,
years
he
ago?
put them in, and when he turned them up, they whistled all the time.
Oh, sure.
So then he turned them down, and he still couldn't hear, and it was just this very frustrating thing.
Sure.
And so I thought, why not? I was young enough, go to school and become an occupational hearing conservationist and teach people how to protect their hearing when they're exposed to noise.
That's just amazing.
It was a fun job. However, what I learned was no one cared.
No one cared that
People
they
didn't
couldn't
care.
hear?
No one cared that they could potentially lose their hearing. Right?
Because that's the way it was.
Well, we all feel that way. I remember when I was younger, I didn't wear a seatbelt, right? We sat in the back of the truck, drove down Highway 53, and we were invincible. We saw that with drunk driving. We see that with teens texting while driving. We seem to think we're invincible. And so I was beating my head against the proverbial wall, trying to get people to realize why they needed to wear hearing protection. Towards the end of the year of working in this field, I woke up one morning and was incredibly dizzy. I was throwing up. I was crawling to the bathroom. I couldn't move. After months of misdiagnosis, it turns out I have endolymphatic hydrops.
What?
Endolymphatic hydrops.
Oh, sure. That was going to be my guess.
Right. So a lot of people understand what Meniere's is.
Oh, sure.
Yep. Meniere's is a little bit different. Meniere's is hearing loss, tinnitus, and vertigo. Vertigo is a fancy term for a medical term for dizziness, right?
And it came overnight?
Came overnight.
Wow.
Nothing I did, nothing I could have done to prevent it.
Sure.
And an audiologist I had seen at the time had said, well, you're just going to need to get hearing aids.
Ah, you now.
And I said,
Uh-oh.
there's no way I'm putting an expensive piece of plastic in my ears.
There you go.
And that was it. However, just because you feel that way doesn't mean that's the truth. And so my husband and I decided at the time that I was still young enough that we need to solve this problem. I didn't decide to get hearing aids. What I decided to do was go to school to fix hearing aids. And that was my trajectory, my goal. So I waltzed into the Miracle Ear in Rice Lake, Wisconsin, and said, I need to understand your product because I'm not going to put it in my ears until we can fix it.
Wow, I bet they don't have a lot of people that walk in and say that.
Probably not.
Wow.
That gentleman that I met that day is now the president of the International Hearing Society. We've worked together for a lot of years. He lives out of Marshfield, and he really was a great mentor.
Good.
Honestly, he taught me a great many things. What I learned then, what everybody thinks about hearing aids is so false.
Okay, first of all, why do they think that?
Well, the first problem is we tend to put the cure on a product without understanding the problem.
Right.
And so I've grown a lot in 20 years. That was almost 20 years ago. And I educate wherever I can, wherever anyone will allow me to, on the problems with hearing impairment. So let's just back up a second and say we both have a visual impairment. Obviously, we're wearing glasses.
Right.
What's different is if I didn't have my glasses on, there's a piece of paper. I have some stats numbers on here. I would say, Diane, I can't read this because it's so blurry.
Right.
Right? Well, that sounds silly, but people with hearing loss say that all the time. I can't hear you because you're not speaking clearly. So we don't understand what's happening to us, and because we have nothing to relate it to, we don't know that it's the background noise or not. We don't know that it's our hearing, and we're not very good at testing our hearing to determine where it's at. Instead, I hear people say, oh, my hearing's fine. How do you know it's fine? You really don't. You don't know where your sensitivities are.
You're right. I was in optical for a lot of years, and the cases that would really almost bring me to tears are when the little kids would come in and we'd put their glasses on and they would look out these big shop windows and just be in awe because they had learned to interpret a blur and they did not realize they could not see, like you said, because they couldn't compare it to anything. This is how they've always seen. And they were just, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't stop looking.
Well, I've actually had glasses since the 4th grade, and a couple years ago I got some new ones and I saw pebbles in the road. It's amazing, but visually it's real. I see the cup.
Exactly.
Hearing sounds, you don't know what you're missing.
Right. If you're not hearing it, you don't know you're good.
Yep. And so, we just didn't understand that. But more to the problem is that, so we go years We go years hearing a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
And so we blame the circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time a person comes in, they expect a hearing aid to be put in, much like we put glasses on.
Ta-da!
And I hear what I want to hear, and I don't hear what I don't want to hear. What no one is talking about is the effect it has on our brain. So we need to think about the fact that sound travels through an entire ear system. It's an incredible system. I brought up an ear just so people can understand that it's more than this little flappy cartilage on the side of our head. It changes energies, and by the time it gets to the brain, there's a spot in our brain that's reserved for processing the sound that comes from the ear. And when we're not feeding that system over time, it atrophies. It forgets how to work.
That's just amazing.
It's incredible. There's since 2010, there's been a plethora of research trying to understand the correlation between hearing loss and dementia, because we know when the brain is without that information, which is so critical for us to sit here and communicate, right? It puts us in the company of man to be able to communicate, right? So when it's without that, we literally forget it. So that when we put a hearing aid in, it's stimulating an atrophied, damaged part of the brain. A hearing aid can't fix it, and it doesn't matter how much money a person puts in. It doesn't matter how sophisticated that hearing aid is. It goes to a region that's not working as well.
Does that ever regenerate?
No.
So if it's atrophying, if it's dying, it stays at that point?
Correct.
So I would imagine that the longer somebody waits to come in, the harder it is to restore full hearing.
Yeah. I had a lady yesterday, an incredibly sweet lady that came in. She hears nothing without a hearing aid.
Oh, okay.
And so this is really important.
Older woman?
She's an older woman.
Okay.
Yep. What's really important is she said, I have a family history. All my family's deaf. Now, we use that word and we throw it around and without thinking of the weight of that word. Deafness. Deafness is the absence of sound. Deafness is taking a breath and not hearing yourself. Deafness is the absence, right? Blindness. If I'm completely blind, I see nothing. Glasses won't help. And so I asked her, did they wear hearing aids? And she said, yes, they all wore hearing aids. So we know they weren't deaf. So with sound, she could hear sound. I could make sound loud enough for her to hear it.
Sure.
So she was wearing older hearing aids, not really that old, a few years old. And I tested her with them in, and she understood 3 out of 25 words.
Oh, did she understand that she only heard 3 out of 20?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
So she came obviously seeking help.
Sure.
And this happens a lot. People will come in and say, I need new hearing aids. Am I able to help her? Yes. Through testing, I found that with good prescribed hearing aids, she could get 60%. That's better than 12%.
No kidding.
It's a poor score.
Yeah.
A person who gets 70% or less will always have complaints of their hearing aids. They will still need to look at people to communicate. They will still not do well in a group environment.
Right. Noisy. Background noise everywhere, restaurants.
And that's not a problem of the hearing aids.
Yes.
That's a problem with the brain's ability to make use of the information coming from the ear. It gets worse as we age. Sadly, I see these numbers in people in their 50s and 60s as well, because untreated hearing loss is a significant problem. We have people graduating from high school with hearing impairment that don't realize they have it.
Is it because of our lifestyle?
It is absolutely due to our lifestyle.
Lots of noise.
Noise, medications, illnesses. There are 200 plus medications that are toxic to our ears. High doses of aspirin are toxic to our ears.
Who would ever think that?
Right.
It's medication affects your hearing. It's like, come on.
Yeah, one thing that's not talked about that I really try to get out there, chemotherapy. I had years ago, before this was even studied. I had a lady that came in and she had said, I need new hearing aids. I'm not hearing. And of course, when people can't hear, they're shouting at you. I did a hearing test and learned that she had lost all of her hearing. Very profound. She's now was at the time deaf. And I had to write everything on paper and said to her, you don't have any hearing left. And it was chemotherapy. And she said, it can't be. My oncologist said it wouldn't harm my hearing. Now, we don't know everything about chemotherapy, but we do know some of the agents being used are more toxic than others. And due to our bodies, how we handle it is different.
Sure.
I recently had another gentleman that got a chemo agent that was supposed to be safe for his hearing, and it eradicated all of the hearing in his left ear.
Oh, my goodness.
It happens, and we need to be watching that. And so when people are on chemo,
right,
they need to insist that their oncologist is partnered with an ENT and audiologist who can monitor it. If a person is wearing hearing aids, they shouldn't be wearing hearing aids at full prescription, because what's happening, cisplatin is a very good, very popular one that will do this. The agent makes the cilia inside of our ears overactive, hyperactive.
Okay.
And so that's what's happening with most ototoxic medications, medications toxic to our ears, is the cilia start to move more than they should. So they're moving without sound stimulation. And then we start listening to music, or we're going to a concert, or we ride a lawnmower, whatever the case is. That sound is more damaging to our ears, and it snaps the cilia off. Permanent damage. You cannot get that back.
So is this everyone who has chemotherapy?
No.
And so somebody comes in, patient of yours.
Yep.
They've just found out they have cancer. Their doctors prescribed a series of chemo. What do you do at that point?
Well, the very first thing I do is measure their hearing. So we get a baseline test before they start chemo. Not all of the patients let me know before chemo starts. So as soon as we can, we test their hearing. If they're a patient who is a hearing aid wearer, I have a lot of people who come to me for hearing tests, so we can monitor them. But if they're a hearing aid wearer, I turn the hearing aids down. I encourage hearing protection whenever they're exposed to noise. And when they're visiting with their doctor, I want them to wear the hearing aid, but at a much lower level, just so they can hear something, but they're not risking damaging their hearing. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of white papers and articles that are available to us on this. I'm unfortunately shooting from the hip in this. I did have a patient who had heard me talk about this, so he came in right away before chemo started. We did my protocol of turning him down. We waited 6 months post-chemo and then turned his hearing aids back up, and he didn't lose his hearing. Maybe it was the medication. Maybe it was the protocol.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Definitely. I find it interesting that probably the last couple of years, there has been a big connection between hearing loss and Alzheimer's, which makes sense, because with Alzheimer's, the person with the disease just seems to get more and more insular. They can't hear, they don't remember, and then finally off into their own little world and hearing loss. So tell me, because we live in a noisy society, no matter where we live in a noisy society. When do you recommend people come in for a baseline? Should they be 60?
No. So I actually serve on several boards. I serve on an international hearing societies committee called the Education and Training Committee. We worked very hard. I had to push very hard to get that number moved to 40. Why 40? Well, a lot happens to us as we hit 40
Yeah.
years old. We
Yeah, you're
slow
right.
down,
Yeah.
right? And so I wanted that number, the age recommendation younger, but we settled on 40. Last year, when we had our meeting in Arizona, we moved that number to 19.
Wow.
With
40 to 19?
Mhm.
That's almost a 20-year drive. I mean, wow.
Really? A 21-year difference, and that is because we know so much. So it's not causation, and this is really important for everyone to know. Hearing loss does not cause dementia. Dementia, all-cause dementia, it's not specifically Alzheimer's. We can have dementia in many aspects.
Right.
But what's important is we have a direct correlation. A person with a very mild degree of hearing impairment, they don't even realize they have it, is 2 times more likely to develop dementia.
Wait a minute. One more time.
A person with a mild hearing impairment is 2 times more likely to develop dementia. Now, the typical person who comes to my office who feels they have a problem, and by problem, what they mean is their problem is their spouse mumbles.
Right.
Their problem is their grandchildren don't speak up.
Yes.
So they come to prove that they're right.
Yeah, right.
By the time they come in, they have more than a 40 dB, decibel, hearing loss. By that point, they are more than 3 times to 4 times more likely to develop dementia. The typical person coming in for treatment has a 50 decibel hearing loss or greater, and they are 5 times more likely to develop dementia. We see it a lot. So it's very important. How do we get to these people?
Right.
How do we get people who understand to go to the dentist every 6 months?
I know. Or have their eyes examined every
Have
year.
their eyes checked. How do we get people to understand that same thing with our hearing? Our hearing leads to a better or poorer quality of life.
Exactly.
We needed to move the needle to 19. At least 6 graduating students out of the Spooner School in 2020 will have hearing impairment. That's a fact. That number continues to rise. In fact, the World Health Organization has some very good numbers on this. Currently, 466 million people in the world have disabling hearing loss. Now, when I say disabling, we're talking about the 4 to 5 times higher risk of dementia category. That's disabling loss. So earlier I'd said communication sets us in company with fellow men, right? We can sit here and talk.
Right.
When you have hearing impairment, what happens is you withdraw.
Sure.
You say, I didn't need to hear it.
Right.
All of these things. A person with hearing impairment, mild hearing impairment, makes on average $30,000 less a year in income.
You're kidding.
Nope.
So how well you can hear can sometimes determine how much you can make?
Think of this as an employer. If you're my employee, and you incessantly ask me to repeat,
oh, sure,
I'm certainly not going to promote you.
No.
I also may think you don't care about the job.
Or she just doesn't get it.
Doesn't get it. There are many things that come with people who maybe you're self-aware, and so you stop asking me to repeat, right?
Right.
So that's even worse.
Yeah.
And, with bankers, accountants, we see it all of the time. They make financial mistakes.
Yeah.
15 and 50 sure sounds similar. A person with hearing loss can't discern that difference. So the point is it's disabling, and people don't know they're making those mistakes.
So how do we corral 19-year-olds in school? They give the even to the smallest, they give the illiterate E, that you take your hand in whichever way the E is going. I mean, these kids can barely get out of diapers, and they're already. Yeah. How do you snag these 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds? How do you get them? How do you get people to understand how important it is to do at least a baseline?
Well, it certainly is going to start at the school level.
Sure.
Right now, I got a notice. I registered my little children for school, and they notified us that pre-K, kindergarten, first and third grades will be getting hearing screenings.
Good.
That is great.
But
our 13-year-olds, our 12-year-olds, our 10-year-olds, they're at significant risk of hearing impairment because of these wonderful earphones. In fact, on my children's school supply list, both last year and this year, they have headphones that are now required.
What for?
Well, they do computer stuff, so obviously they want the room to be quiet, so they plug them in. However, are they controlling the amount of sound put in? And everybody needs noise-free time. Our ears need rest. Our ears are the only thing on 24/7. So just think about this for a moment.
Right. You close your eyes.
You get rest. You lay down and you sleep. Now, if someone knocks on your door, you hear that sound, and it sends a signal to your brain, and it alerts you. It wakes you up.
Sure.
A sound that's not supposed to be there. However, a furnace kicks on, and that doesn't wake us. Why? Our ear is sending the signal to the brain, and our little hippocampus, our part of our brain, says, just ignore it. It's a safe sound. We expect that, right? So our ear is constantly feeding the brain, and the brain has to decide whether to wake you or allow you to sleep.
Sure.
Children nowadays are not getting adequate rest. They have these, for a lack of better words, stupid little devices that allow you to plug an iPad into a pillow. Children are running fans all night to help them relax and sleep.
Wait. An iPad into a pillow?
Yes.
Wow, you're going to be in business forever.
It's tragic.
It is
tragic. It's not the business I want to be in.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So how many people fall asleep and all night with the TV on?
Yes.
So it's constantly noise. Can you see any immediate future in testing these kids, not only in the little grades, but say in high school?
Diane, if I have my way.
And you will.
I will get mandatory 10-year-old testing, 12-year-old age testing, 14, 16, and senior year. It's critical that we know where people are at, especially they go to college. We're spending an absurd amount of money in college.
Yeah, we are.
We're not setting our children up for great success if we're not catching early hearing loss.
Right.
When we recognize that this is a problem, and by problem, that 466 million people, by 2050, we're projected to have over 900 million people worldwide with disabling hearing loss.
You can see why.
Yes. It's when you think about that, and then we talk about the relationship or correlation between hearing loss and dementia, what will this world be? We've got to start out at an earlier age. We've got to get adults to recognize that this is a natural part of life right now, not to wait until they feel there's a problem, but come in. Have a hearing test. Great. If you have normal hearing, I am super excited for you.
Right.
I honor patients who come in and say, hey, I'd like to know where it's at. It's cheap. It's very cheap to do this. Know where it's at. Another thing that we really need to shed some light on that a lot of people don't even realize is how our ear is attached to the rest of our body. So the cochlea, which is where a lot of hearing loss occurs, is very sensitive to blood flow. It's highly vascularized is the fancy term for it. So let's say, God forbid, someone has heart disease. Our blood flow isn't pumping adequately, and that cochlea is so sensitive, it'll start to drop in two very critical frequencies. The person with the problem doesn't know it's happening. But over time, we monitor someone's hearing and we start seeing drops there, and we refer them to a cardiologist. This happened to me. The research came out in 2008. In 2010, a patient came in and said he needed new hearing aids. And I said, you don't need new hearing aids. We can adjust your hearing aids. I did a test and went, oh,
oops.
You had a drop in these two critical tones. So I suggested he see a cardiologist, had to get him through his physician insurance reasons, and his physician referred at the time refused to refer him.
Well, sure, just because of his hearing.
Who are you?
Yeah.
This makes no sense. I sent a bunch of white papers, the Friedland research from '08. It was a couple months it took to get him in to the cardiologist. The day he went in, he had triple bypass surgery. I'm not saying I'm not a physician.
Right.
This is not my scope of practice.
Right.
It's important to recognize that. But it's also important to recognize our ears and audiometry play a vital role in overall health, and we're just not taking it seriously.
I think anybody listening to this program today has had their eyes open, because we're all in this mentality that it's just my ears, little realizing that the body is a whole unit and one thing affects another thing. Something I want to ask you before we go is many people don't even start the hearing aid thing because, holy cow, are they expensive? Tell me about price. Tell me about how expensive they are.
They are expensive. In 2015, PCAST is the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. PCAST put a report to the Obama administration and said, listen, we have a problem. This hearing loss thing is a substantial problem, and people aren't treating their hearing impairment because of cost.
Right.
Now, I brought that report. I figured you'd ask about cost because everyone wants to know about it.
Sure.
What they said is the average price of just one hearing aid is costing more than $2,300, and most consumers pay double that for each ear. That's false. There's these people marketing hearing aids. They're not talking about the hearing impairment. They're not talking about hearing health. What they're talking about is, I need to sell hearing aids. And so they offer 50% off because we as humans, who doesn't love a 50% off sale?
Yeah.
In order to offer 50% off, you have to have markup.
Sure.
Right? So they're advertising these 50% off hearing aids off of $12,000.
Oh, sure.
And selling them for $6,000.
Yeah.
What's critical is they're also advertising a free hearing test. Free services for life.
Yes.
Then you have to understand that the hearing aids don't cost $6,000. You're paying and prepaying for services that you've not even used. So I have a pair of hearing aids. I fit quite a few people with these. It's $2,800 for a pair. That's expensive. And I don't take it lightly. That's expensive. I have to buy them from a manufacturer. And that's the cost from the manufacturer.
Sure.
Now, you have to know what goes into the price. So some manufacturers will give, if I franchise, let's say I own a part of this company that names our hearing aids the same as my company. I won't say Miracle Ear, but it's a good example, right? You're paying for a name, and you're getting incredible buying power. So the hearing aids that cost Samantha Sikorski $2,800, someone else is getting for $1,800.
Okay.
I don't mark the hearing aids up. I ask you to pay the price, and I charge you for my time, and that's the reason why I don't offer free hearing tests. Now, is that right? There are people who want to prepay, and that's okay to prepay. You need to know what you're getting. There's financing available. Cost is not the reason people put off hearing aids, and I can prove it. A year ago, I offered free hearing aids for a week.
Wow.
100% free. Why did I do that? Where I worked prior to opening this, I did very well. I made some good money. And I decided that I wasn't going to do that. I was going to change this industry when I opened my own practice, charge what I was being charged. Every time a patient came in to buy hearing aids, I put $25 in a bank account. That, by last year, had accumulated over $9,000. I worked with a manufacturer who offers free hearing aids to people who cannot afford hearing aids. but they do charge for paperwork, fees,
right,
all of
right.
that fun stuff, and it's a few $100s.
Sure.
So I partnered with them and said, you provide the hearing aids, I will pay for all the paperwork fees. And we went, my staff and I, a family, I put it on Facebook. I went to churches. There was a lady who had a GoFundMe asking for $6,800 to afford her hearing aids.
Ooh.
I reached out and I said, they're not $6,800.
Right.
Come in, I can help you. And she said, nope, I went to this company. They said I needed these hearing aids, and that's what it's going to cost. Hearing aids do not have to cost that. You have to know what you're paying for.
Right.
It's not the expense. It's the mentality. How many people did we get in that week? 0. I extended it to a month. We got 1 person. Several people who were spoken to by their church members, they said, oh no, I'm not ready for hearing aids. It's not that bad.
Exactly.
We don't get a hearing test because we need hearing aids. We get a hearing test because we care about our health. When hearing aids are necessary, I am fighting for you. I serve on several committees. I am working and presenting next month at an international convention on insurance, on the problems with insurance. I teach people about insurance. We fight for people to get affordable hearing aids.
Good.
They're still expensive.
Sure they are.
That I can't get around. But we're going to do what we can to make them affordable for the end user.
Okay, so in your office,
Yes.
Sikorski
Hearing Aid Center.
Hearing Aid Center.
Yes.
Someone comes in. What are their payment options?
Well, if they have a certain income level,
Okay.
they will get them for free. In a year, I've still not provided all the hearing aids I had saved to provide. So right now, I still extend that to people who cannot afford them. A person who can't drop $3,000 on a pair of hearing aids.
Right.
I work with manufacturers to help get discounts.
Okay. So when I come in, am I required to bring my checkbook or a charge card? Or do you have payment plans?
If
or how
you
does
like.
that work?
So Jody at my office will accept any form of payment.
Okay.
However, yes, we offer financing. So you can do 12 months of payments
Good to
with
know.
0% interest.
Wow. Really good to know.
Yep.
How do people find you? Where are you? Do you have a Facebook page? Do you have a web
I
page?
do. SikorskiHearing.com is our website.
Spell Sikorski.
Oh, isn't it easy?
It's easy for me. I mean, it's spelled like it sounds, but
Yeah, Sikorski without the C. So it's SIKORSKI.
yes.
SikorskiHearing.com.
Okay.
We have a Facebook page.
Good.
I have Twitter, though no one uses Twitter. I hardly ever use it myself,
I
but
know.
we have it. 715-939-1296 will get you to an incredible front office gal. We have Jody. Stop by. We're in the Tim Reedy State Farm building at the north end of Spooner.
Mm-hmm.
I have a location in Cumberland, across from the old Quick Trip.
Where do you have time to have another office?
Where do I have time?
You are just international speaker and constantly on the go. You can tell you've got a passion.
I do. I've never been accused of a lack of passion.
And that's wonderful because so many people go to their jobs every day. You ask them, how is it going? Well, it's a job. Where you have just absolutely got a passion. And with this knowledge of hearing aids, being able to hear, it is a reflection of your brain. It's a reflection of your blood flow. It's a reflection of who you are, your person. Mm-hmm. I would suggest strongly, if you can, call her up, make an appointment. What does it cost for a first appointment?
A baseline for a person who feels they have no hearing issues is $28.
$28. That's coffee money in today's world. Mm-hmm. $28. So they can call your office. They can make an appointment. Mm-hmm. They can come in and they can be amazed. Either, wow, I have excellent hearing, or wow, I had no idea.
Yes. Yep.
Anything else you'd like to add? Anything I haven't asked you?
Well, that's a rabbit trail.
But you've got a patient coming into your office
There's so many
soon.
things we could talk about.
Sure.
And in reality, I hope what comes of today is people understand the importance of hearing. I will, one thing we didn't have a chance to talk about is the fact that over the counter is now coming, where people can buy hearing aids online. They are misrepresenting hearing aids. People need to understand this. A hearing aid is a medical grade device that is prescribed to the person's hearing impairment. No hearing aid can magically be put in an ear
Ta-da.
and fit to your loss, which is what some of them are advertising.
Sure.
People can come to my office and have these devices measured to see if they're fitting to their needs.
Mm-hmm.
And we can check it for them, but there's no magic cure.
Mm-hmm.
People don't like sometimes me saying we can't fix it, and so they're willing to throw a lot of money away trying to find that wonderful cure. Another thing we find in hearing impairment sometimes asymmetries between the right and left ear, which can be a flag for tumors. And
Tumors where?
In the 8th cranial nerve, typically. So what
Head
happens?
Tumors. Cranial.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Acoustic neuromas. 1% of the cases will have them. I had 6 in 2018.
Oh my goodness.
So I want to make sure we did talk about cost of hearing aids. If someone takes their health seriously,
right,
get a hearing test. Let's not put the cart before the horse.
Mm-hmm.
Have the hearing tests and do them at minimum every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to a physician about them. Medicare. I am working with Medicare. I just got back from a trip from DC, meeting with past CMS, that's Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, director. I take patients' lives seriously. I travel the country to speak to the people we need to. Medicare right now statutorily excludes hearing aids. They will also not cover a hearing test if it's done for the purpose of treating with hearing aids.
Right.
However, if you are a Medicare beneficiary and you are concerned about your hearing, speak to your physician and ask them to order a hearing test.
Oh, sure.
Medicare
referrals.
Yes, when your physician orders it just out of medical necessity.
Right.
They cannot order it for a hearing aid treatment.
Right.
If they order it just to understand where you're at medically, Medicare will cover that test.
Oh, that's wonderful to know.
Yep.
Sikorski, Sikorski, right?
Yes.
In Spooner, Wisconsin. She's a busy woman, absolutely busy woman. Her office is always humming with business. But give her a call. You're hearing your whole body health can be detected through your ears. Who knew?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming. We could talk another couple of hours.
Yes.
But
I have a patient.
Yeah, I know. You've got a patient and we've got to end this. So thanks again for coming, for joining us. We've got a great guest next week. And until then, keep it cooking.